Thank you. Thank you all very much. Welcome to this evening at the beautiful auditorium here in the Voice of America building. My name is Scott Silbert, and I'll be hosting the concert this evening of the music of probably one of the greatest saxophone players that ever picked up the instrument, Johnny Hodges. He's a real hero of mine, and I know he's just a tremendously well-respected saxophone player and musician for everybody. Before we continue, though, I'd like to introduce the folks in the band here from the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Ensemble. On tenor saxophone, Charlie Young. On trumpet, Tommy Williams. On trombone, John Jensen. On piano, Tony Knocker. On bass, Michael Bowie. And on the drums, Mr. Ken Kimmery. We have a lot of music to play tonight, and I have some biographical information I'd like to share with you about Johnny Hodges, but we're going to play for a little while, and I'll talk when needed or when not needed. I'll try to stay out of the way of the music. That first tune we did for you was a composition by Johnny Hodges entitled "The Jeep is Jumpin'." And the next tune we're going to do is another Johnny Hodges composition entitled "Good Queen Bess." Good Queen Bess. There's a lot of speculation as to who that tune was written for. A lot of people thought it was written for royalty over in England, but in fact it was written for Johnny Hodges' mother. He wrote that tune in honor of his mother. Let me take a moment here to just give you a brief biographical background to Johnny Hodges. I'm sure many, many of you know Johnny Hodges from his association with the fabulous Duke Ellington Orchestra, who he had a long association with, I'm sure over 30, 35 years that he played with Duke's band. The music that we're playing for you tonight, though, is being pulled from the period when Johnny Hodges left Duke Ellington's band to form his own band back in 1951. From about 1951 to 1955, he led his own group, exact same instrumentation, and the exact same music. And a lot of the music that Johnny Hodges played with his band was pulled from music that he played with Duke's band, because that's the music that really kind of made him an international star on the saxophone. But he had some new material that he added to the band, and this next piece that we're going to play for you was one of those pieces. It was composed by the tenor saxophone player in the Johnny Hodges group, a fellow by the name of Al Sears, who also had a long history with the Ellington band, played tenor saxophone. I think actually may have come in the band about the time Ben Webster was leaving, sometime in the mid-1940s. And Al Sears joined Johnny Hodges when he started his own band. And this was one of their commercial hits that the band had, and it's entitled Castle Rock. Charlie on tenor sax. What's going to follow that? What are we going to do now? Now we're going to do a tune that Johnny Hodges composed in honor of his former boss, Duke Ellington, very simply titled Duke's Blues.
Tommy Williams, John Jensen, Charlie Young.
Johnny Hodges was born in July of 1907 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And his given name at birth, there's a door prize if anybody can tell me what his real name was. Cornelius. He picked up the name Johnny from his dad. His father's name was John, so they just started calling him Little Johnny or just John. And he kept that name for the rest of his life, along with some other nicknames that you may have heard. Rabbit was another very popular nickname for Johnny Hodges. There's been some speculation as to why. Maybe it's because he kind of looked like a rabbit, or he said that when he was young, he could outrun all the truant officers. He could outrun them. So he was quick as a rabbit. So that was his contribution to that nickname. And the other nickname that he had was Jeep. Now, Jeep comes from a cartoon, Popeye. There was a little animal in there that his name was Jeep. For some reason, Johnny Hodges picked up that nickname. So Jeep, Jeep's Blues, Jeep is Jumpin', Rabbit, Johnny Hodges, Cornelius, whatever you want to call him. He's still a genius. When he was quite young, he started out like most kids, banging on pots and pans, wanted to play the drums, and actually worked at playing the drums for a while and did some jobs on drums when he was a young man. And he was also a very proficient piano player and actually did some work on piano before he finally discovered the saxophone. In the 1920s in the United States, there was a saxophone craze going on. Every home just about in the country had a saxophone. Much like in the 1960s, almost every home had an electric guitar. Well, back in the 1920s, every home had a saxophone. Johnny Hodges was very attracted to that instrument and began practicing it in earnest when he was very young and became quite proficient at an early age. His big hero on the saxophone was Sidney Bechet. And when he was quite young, he had the opportunity to meet Sidney Bechet in Boston. Sidney Bechet was appearing in the Boston area with a review. And Johnny's older sister had known Bechet while he was there and introduced young John Hodges to his hero, Sidney Bechet, and he pulled his saxophone out of he didn't have a case for his little soprano saxophone. He carried it in a coat sleeve. And he took it out, and he played it for Johnny Hodges, or for Sidney Bechet. He played the tune, My Honey's Lovin' Arms. And Sidney Bechet was quite touched and gave him a lot of encouragement. And really, that was all he needed to take off, and he decided his future as a saxophone player. That's where it came from. He had a very good friendship with Sidney Bechet, and they worked together quite a bit in the early years. When Johnny started, when he would go back and forth from Boston to New York to work jobs, he would commute. And one of the first jobs he had was working with Sidney Bechet in his own nightclub. I think it was called the Club Bechet. Sidney had his own club, and John would come down and they would play duets, saxophone, clarinet, or two soprano saxophones. And then in about 1928 is when he was working with the Chick Webb Big Band as a saxophone player. And in 1928, he'd gotten wind that Duke Ellington, a young Duke Ellington who had the band at the Cotton Club up in Harlem, had a really good orchestra and looked like there might be an opening for him. And with Chick Webb's blessing, he moved over into Duke's band, where he stayed for the rest of his life. Pretty much was with the band for over 35 years, except for this period the music that we're performing for you tonight. And to continue on with the music, we're going to do a composition by Duke Ellington, the very beautiful Mood Indigo.
about a hand for this band? How about a hand for this fantastic band? I'm sorry. How about a hand for this fantastic band? These guys are...
Yeah, it's such an honor for me to be able to share the stage with these guys because they're not only just phenomenal musicians, but they're great people. And it's really a blessing for me to do this. Good night. I'm done. We're going to continue on with a tune that comes from the Jimmy Lunsford Band. It was written by Trummy Young, the trombone player, the great trombone player from the Jimmy Lunsford Band, and it's called Through for the Night. But we're not done, so don't leave. We'll have an intermission later, but we're not leaving. Through for the Night. Through for the Night. You know, when you think about this incredible universe that Duke Ellington created with his orchestra, not only did he present a phenomenal band that was really full of some of the greatest musicians of that time. It's taken me a long time as I mature. The more I learn about that band, it really is a remarkable orchestra, because the musicians in there were just amazing, amazing musicians. Not only Johnny Hodges, but people like Harry Carney, Rex Stewart, Cootie Williams, Ben Webster, Lawrence Brown, Tricky Sam Nanton. I mean, the history of jazz is written from the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So not only did he present just an amazing group of musicians, but the compositions that he wrote specifically for gentlemen in his band, the soloist. And he did so when he would hire a new player, that he would study them. He wouldn't immediately start writing for this new player. He would listen to them for a while, get to hear what they were, get to see what kind of person they were, what kind of player they were, what their strengths were. And then he would proceed to write magnificent compositions. He wrote so many for Johnny Hodges when Johnny Hodges was in his band. Tunes like, well, let me get my list. I had a list here. Old Man Blues from 1928. Come Sunday from the Black, Brown, and Beige suite. I Got It Bad and That Ain't Good. The list could go on forever. And also, the other gentleman who worked very closely with Duke Ellington, of course, we know, is Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn and Johnny Hodges were very close, very good friends, and Johnny Hodges inspired Strayhorn to write some of the most magnificent music for him also. Just some beautiful tunes. One of them we'll be doing shortly. We'll be doing a couple of Billy Strayhorn selections tonight, in addition to this material. The next tune we're going to do for you, though, is one of Duke's early hits, and it's called I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart.
John Jensen on the trombone. playing those exceedingly high C-sharp concerts. Beautiful, John. Like I said before, Billy Strayhorn and Johnny Hodges had a very close friendship, and through which Strayhorn wrote some amazing ballads. A couple which come to mind are a tune called Blood Count, which was recorded on probably one of Ellington's greatest, my favorite albums of Duke Ellington, and if you don't have it, you have to get it. It's called And His Mother Called Him Bill. It was the album they recorded after Billy Strayhorn had passed away, and it's beautiful and devastating and exciting. It's really one of the best big band albums ever, so I would recommend that highly to you. The next tune we're going to do for you, though, was one that Billy Strayhorn wrote back, I think, in the 1940s as a feature for Johnny Hodges, and for me, it's a real pleasure for me to get to play this tune because I love this next tune. It's one of my favorite tunes, really, and getting to play it in this ensemble is a real thrill. It's entitled Daydream.
That is a great piece of music by Billy Strayhorn, Daydream. We're going to close this first half of the concert and give you a little intermission. And we're going to close this with another Billy Strayhorn composition, which, of course, famously was the theme song for the Duke Ellington Orchestra. And this is Take the A Train.
the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra Ensemble. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you. The band. Squatty Roo. Squatty Roo. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Young on the tenor sax. Tommy Williams on the trumpet. John Jensen on the slide trombone. Michael Bowie on bass. Tony Knocker on the piano. And Ken Kimmery on the drums.
We're going to continue now with another piece that Johnny Hodges wrote. I think he wrote this back in the late 1930s for a small group date. You know, at the time, Ellington, unlike a lot of band leaders, was very happy to have members of his band go out and record small group recordings. Some band leaders like, Lionel Hampton and Cab Calloway, they were very protective of what the guys, their sidemen did. But Ellington was very happy to let his sidemen go out and record under their own names. And sometimes he would even accompany them in on the piano, or he would provide arrangements. And this next tune is one of Johnny Hodges' early compositions, and it's a nice slow blues, and it's called Jeep's Blues.
Tony Knocker on piano.
Ballad for the very sad and very tired Lotus Eaters. Okay, we're at the last tune of the night. Oh, no, go on now. It's going to be long. We're going to stretch out on it, so don't worry. Before we finish, though, I'd like to thank a few people. First of all, for the Voice of America for allowing us to use this wonderful auditorium. And for our two sound engineers who were helping, and I'm sorry I can't remember your gentleman's name. Thank you very much for your help tonight. And I would like to mention that the Smithsonian, of course, I thank them. I tip my hat and my head to the Smithsonian for allowing us to be able to do this evening. I appreciate that very much, wherever you are, Mr. Smithsonian. Thank you. Where they house the Ellington archives, where they have just a treasure trove of America's great classic music there, not just Duke Ellington. Bill Russo, Bill Holman, Benny Carter, any number of great artists there. It's a wonderful institution, and I'm very proud and happy to be associated with it. And before I introduce the band again, I would like to thank you all for coming out tonight and supporting not just the Smithsonian, not just the Voice of America, but live jazz. It means more to us than you know, to know that there's an audience that still appreciates not just good music, but great American music, great jazz. And you folks are very fortunate to live in a metropolitan area where you have a wonderful collection of great musicians. And I mean it when I say thank you all very much for coming out and supporting live jazz, and please do it as often as you can. Thank you very much. Before we go, one more time on trombone, John Jensen. Good. On trumpet, Tom Williams. Tenor saxophone, Charlie Young. Michael Bowie on bass. Hey, hey. Tony Knocker on the piano. And Ken Kimmery on the drums. All right. We're going to leave you swinging with Duke's In a Melotone.
the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Ensemble. Gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we got one more. One more. That's it, though. All right, we'll go till 12. Okay. No, again, like I said earlier, we thank you so much for coming out and being such a wonderful audience, so enthusiastic, and it really is, it makes our job so much easier to play for such great people. We're going to leave you swinging with Duke Ellington's It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That. Right. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. The Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra Ensemble. Thank you.